Hi there, everyone. Welcome. I'm Marc Laurenson from Sydney Astrology School, and we're going to be looking at the sky for June and beyond. And we're going to be focusing on Jupiter moving into Cancer. And I am here with my good friend, Nicholas Polimenakos. So, hi, Nicholas. How you doing?
I'm great, Mark. How you doing? How are
I'm
you?
really, really good. It's cooling down here now in Australia. We're coming into the last month of autumn now, and so we're starting to put our jackets on and all that kind of stuff. You guys are warming up.
We're warming up where I am. It's interesting though to think of like what your version of getting colder is over there compared to what it would be here. But I totally understand, and I bet you I'm sure after all the heat of the summer, it's nice to get some relief. So
Yeah, I mean, Australia's a big country like the US is, and the north of Australia doesn't get winter at all.
yeah.
But the south of Australia does, as you go further south, it gets really, really chilly. We get a bit of snow in certain parts. I love it. I'm a big, big winter fan. I could have winter, 9 months of the year if it was up to me. But I
Move to
love
Portland
my,
of the Pacific Northwest in the
yeah,
States because
well,
that's what it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're going to have Jupiter moving into Cancer in June. And this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm not one of these people that talk about Jupiter as a lucky planet. People go, "Oh, Jupiter's coming up. You're going to be so lucky," and all this stuff. They could talk about it like it's the cosmic Santa. Um, Jupiter, as far as I'm concerned, Jupiter just makes things bigger. You know, Jupiter just makes things larger. It's all about more. And for some reason, we humans think more is good, more is better. But we have to sit down and really think about this. It's like, is more of something that's not working terribly well really, really good
Sure.
to have
Yeah.
in our lives? So I want to just underscore that before we start, rather than actually going, oh, wherever you have cancer in your chart, you're going to be lucky, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, I just want to say wherever you have cancer in your chart, you're going to get more of what's already there, you know, and, there's going to be some kind of opportunity or the gates are going to be open for you in some kind of way because Jupiter gives you more room to move. It'll definitely do that. But it's going to be an interesting time because for a period of time, it's going to be at the beginning, it's going to be squaring Saturn and Neptune. So we need to talk about that as well. So what's your take on Jupiter? Just Jupiter generally. You can talk about
Uh,
Cancer, of course,
Well,
too.
it's can I have another helping? How many plates do I eat after the first meal? You know what I mean? Like that's one of the first things that pops up into my world is like and depending on my emotional state and what I'm doing, maybe I'm feeling okay. I just need a little bit of some food. But depending if I'm in a certain type of emotional state, I could, for some reason, need to eat 3 plates. And so, I say this because of what you said in the beginning. I think I take the philosophy also of just like Jupiter has a certain connotation in the astrology world, and I understand as a benefic, as a benefactor, that type of thing. And I see where the luck factor comes in, but it does overdo and it does just expand way too
Yeah,
far. And Jupiter, regardless of what sign it is, doesn't like boundaries, right?
yeah,
So there's that. So hence, how many plates do I eat, and what gives me a sense of comfort? And that's just something I've been meditating on my own. I mean, when we started this conversation, you were talking about what makes you feel like weather-wise, makes you feel at home. You're like, I could
yeah,
live 9 months in this, and everyone has their version of what that is or
exactly.
how they were shown that
Yeah.
sense of what gives them security and comfort, right? So, I this transit is definitely going to touch upon those things and the cancer part of everybody's chart. So,
For sure, for sure. Let's talk about some dates before we go into this a
mhm.
little bit further. Now, Jupiter's going to be moving into Cancer. June 9, 10, depending on where you are in the world. And it's going to be there until 30th of June or 1st of July of 2026. So it's it takes roughly a year, give or take, to go through a sign. When it moves into Cancer, it comes within 3 degrees of Mercury. And this is when it starts to square. It starts to square Saturn and Neptune at that time. It tightens the square around the 14th and the 15th of June. Um, and it stays there until roughly the 23rd, 24th of June, moves 1 degree past. But then we have the Sun coming up to conjunct it, and then we have the moon coming up to conjunct it. So therefore, we're going to have a new moon conjunct Jupiter in Cancer on the 24th or the 25th of June. Okay. So a lot of activity going on there with other planets as well, plus having the new moon, of course. Now, what I want to say about the sign of Cancer, I have 3 Cancerians in my family,
Oh,
including my late mum, so I know them very, very well. I know the sign of Cancer incredibly well. And I'm a Cancer rising. I'm a 0 degrees Cancer rising. So I know about it. And Cancer is, it's all that stuff, it's all the care and the heart and the feeling of the wanting to protect. But I want to go down the road of protection, um, and that need to defend, When you're looking at the totem of Cancer, it's a crab. It's not a warm and fuzzy image. It's got a shell and it's got nippers. And
hmm.
so when you look at it, you go, okay, I'm not going to get too close. I'm not going to get too close to that animal or that or that crustacean. It's a feeling of something that's ready to bite back. And so when I'm looking at Cancer, I tend to go down that road a little bit. It's kind of like the Cancer energy is that love and that nurturance to give something and protect it so it can thrive, and so it can grow and so it can flourish. But it's the protection energy that becomes very, very strong for Cancer. And I just want to say over this period of time, the need to defend and the need to protect might actually become bigger. It might actually become more pronounced in our lives. And I want to say that this, for me, is something that I think all of us should look at a little bit more. That feeling of holding everything very, very close to us, not allowing anybody else to come in. It can actually be quite divisive at times. It can actually be my stuff against your stuff, or I need to hold on to what I have, or I need to attach onto what I have, rather than wanting to share it. So again, Jupiter, as I said, opens the gates. Jupiter gives you more of this, but it might actually expand an area where you become a little bit more protective over this period of time, or even a little bit more reactive over this period of time. People might say things and you might react a lot bigger than what you normally would. Sometimes your reactions could be good, they need them, but other times you go, oh, okay. Radio, that was kind of like something that was kind of out of proportion a little bit. You know how Jupiter can do that? Jupiter can pull things out of proportion quite a lot. Um, do you have anything to say on the level of that kind of thing, Nicholas?
Yeah, it's interesting to have the pinchers of the crab, and what it is, and to protect what is like sensitive on the inside, under the shell,
Hmm.
and when we're dealing with the sign of Cancer, we're dealing with feelings and emotions and the stories behind them. And, depending on one story and what that is and how sensitive it is, I could totally understand the defending of that. But sometimes in that shell, within that place, if we're too closed off, if we're not willing to step out, right, into somewhere new, um, we can get stagnated in our emotional story. So I see that like I'm on the inward part of it because we're dealing with emotions and
Mm.
and creating safety and security so we can deal with our emotions. But if we're too closed off, we overprotect,
Yeah.
then we don't have the bigger picture. On the other side of it, what Jupiter can do, it can have the crab can't step out into new territory, and not and use its pinchers to kind of guide itself. Not it's not full protection, and so I see both sides of it. But the word hoarding comes into mind sometimes because sometimes I think about what if people were in a survival situation. Let's say there was people living in a house and there was only two potatoes and there was five people. There has to come to a consensus of sharing, right? But then there's certain situations or certain types of people, or whatever, it's because of their habitual responses emotionally,
Mhm.
will grab one whole potato, let's
Yeah.
say, and that is there's not a lot of thinking happening there. It's not a thinking thing. It's not calculative. It is a instinctual habitual response from an emotional place.
Yeah.
So you think about something like that, and let's say because Jupiter's there, you would enhance it by 10, enhance it by 15.
Yeah.
When it comes to safety and security, what one would do for that, right? Just like a
Exactly.
mother protecting her cubs or something would
Totally.
do
Yeah.
with any sense of threat, whether the threat was real or not, right?
Mhm.
So those are the things that come to mind with this. And I think it's interesting too when we deal with like where we come from and our past and our
Yeah.
family, and then what gives us a sense of home, what that means for each of us.
Exactly. Exactly. Like Cancer is a very home-loving sign. It's always going to be about family and tribe and very connected to the past. You know, uh, the Cancerians in my family are always bringing up stuff that happened a long, 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 long time ago, and people talking about, people from generations gone and all that kind of stuff, which is
Mhm.
interesting. But again, I find the family thing really interesting too, because families on one level, I really like the idea of family. I really like the idea of people that bond together and people that feel really connected. And on another level, I think especially with the Jupiter, because Jupiter is always going to be about our laws, in the end. It's
Mhm.
going to be about our ideologies and what we truly believe in. And sometimes with Cancer, that tribal or that clan ideology or that country ideology takes over. And it becomes a little tiny bit like my family and everything to do with us. And it's not necessarily going to open itself up terribly wide. And I think that's what Jupiter is trying to do. I think Jupiter is trying to open the family up. It's trying to actually get to a stage where, we are, where the Earth is a family. Everybody on Earth is a family. The Earth is our home and a feeling of trying to expand an idea of everybody. We're all brothers and sisters, we're all coming from, the same spiritual family in a way, rather than actually dividing off, rather than actually going, it's my family, it's your family, and my stuff and your stuff which kind of happens. You see it all the time. You see it in countries all the time. My country and
Yeah.
what I hold dear and what we believe in is very, very different to yours, rather than actually embracing each other's stuff. There's a feeling of closing off. And so here we have Jupiter, which is about opening up to the world and adventure and knowledge and learning more and trying its best to understand what's going on in other places, possibly trying to expand that. But at the same time, you've got to be very, very conscious of where this is going for you. Are you the kind of person that does include everybody else as part of your human family? Or are you going to close off even more? Is it going to be my stuff
Yeah.
against your stuff?
Yeah, there's a certain type of tribalism story going on there.
Yeah.
I think inherently we're dealing, if we were to think about traditions and what things that get carried over time, stories that carried over within families or communities or countries, and how over time there was certain type of established pillars to those traditions that carried the community, the family, and the country. And it makes sense. And there's an identification with that. And so when do you expand out, right?
Mm,
And depending on the situation in the story, it's great to move out or to accept others who are trying to, let's say, come into the family. But when we get to certain situations of the past and tradition and how one holds on to that, there's, I think, the tension. And if we are more than ever, I think in our history of the world, we're so interconnected in that what you said, Mark, the Earth family. And if you notice in the world, we've had over the last century here, because of technology, whether it's the airplane, the car, and the internet, it's how it can bring people to other countries, other places, other communities. And when you have deeply rooted traditions set and then they're rocked, some of those
yeah.
things are rocked, there is a clinging on to. There is that. And let's say if there is the perceived threat, if can community and cultures understand change in that area and see the bigger picture and even look towards the future, which
Yeah.
Jupiter does. It has a tendency to do this. It's shooting for something. Jupiter's sees something else, possibly a
Yeah.
bigger vision,
Yeah.
right? Now, but again, it depends on the people in the community. Can they see that and incorporate past traditions into building a new tradition? And I think that's kind of the spot that can be difficult for people to see that I think it's always been inherent in humans is traditions have blended and mixed. They have over time, but when you're living in that enclosed place that supposedly has brought you safety and security,
Yeah.
and there's a change to something like that. Their first thing is to say, to close off or to hold in.
Yeah.
But, again, I think as with anything, as humans and especially in astrology, the vessel that you use and the tools that you use to expand upon are very important. And so, I, again, I get the image of the crabs not necessarily moving forwards, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. There are. No, no, no.
it's
No,
they're doing this.
yeah.
So, if you think about this, if we were in a community or a country, how we're doing that as a whole,
Yeah.
and one part of the crab body wants to move this way and the other, and they have to find a way.
Yeah.
But regardless, there is some movement that's happening, and I think one has to understand with Jupiter in general, there is a movement inherently to move forward.
Yeah.
So, so those are some things I'm, thinking about of again, it's not losing tradition, but sometimes parts of the tradition or the memory or what the certain people who cannot help but bring up the past, some of those things might not be functional, that might not serve its
Mm,
purpose anymore.
mm.
It makes me think about the recent transit that we had with Mars and Cancer and the long retrograde cycle that it
Yeah.
had. And I think when Mars inflames and brings things up, I think a lot of the process here brought things up. And I think Jupiter in here is actually gives it a little bit better chance for it to move forward. In that sense, I see the benefit of a Mars retrograde transit that happened in Cancer.
Yeah.
Jupiter is going to come in here. I think in one sense, if we think about long term, right, in the story,
Yeah.
there's a benefit to that. I hope someone sees the benefit of what they encountered during the Mars transit in the Cancer part of their chart. So here comes Jupiter and
Sure.
some of these things that we've been holding or you've been holding in a Cancer part of chart. Can you move forward? And
Yeah.
I
It
think
was like a dress rehearsal almost, wasn't it?
yeah,
It was like a precursor to it all. Because it was there for a long, long time, It was retrograding for a while as Mars does. So there was a lot of ground that it was going over. And so I like the idea of that. I like the idea of Jupiter kind of taking the relay baton now and moving
mhm.
it forward a little bit more. Something to remember is Jupiter was in Cancer during 9/11, which is really interesting. Um, just getting back to the stuff I was saying at the beginning around, the need to protect and defend, and the nippers, the crab nippers coming out. Um, Again, not getting into why it all happened and the whole story around that, but the whole idea of feeling threatened and needing to attack back, that whole thing, to me is very Jupiter in Cancer. And again, the whole idea, of turning that around, because Cancer, when it all boils down, Cancer is the moon sign, and when you're thinking of the moon, you're thinking of an energy that keeps us alive like the sun. The sun and the moon are life-giving luminaries. The moon keeps us alive. It nourishes us. It's our mother's milk. You know what I mean? It keeps us going. It sustains us. It nurtures us, and it's all about love, basically, in the end. It is all about love. And so this is such a great time to remember that. It's such a great time to remember Jupiter, the great benefic, opening wide as you can go, as far as your heart is concerned. And rather than cutting off and defending and reacting, and being scared or threatened, come into a place of recognizing your vulnerability, because we're all vulnerable. We all have a vulnerability that we need to understand and we need to accept, and to recognize that, and to come into a sense of finding compassion there, and then be able to, in your own way, in your own life, however you do it, to be able to be brave enough, or to be, what's a good Jupiter word? To be confident enough, that's a good Jupiter word, to put it out there, to be able to show it, to be able to be part of that Jupiter in Cancer experience in a really, really positive way. And I think if we all join that, if we all come into that, and we all, joined hands, and we don't have to be of the same religion, country, whatever. We can still have a belief in love. We can still have a belief in love. And that's Jupiter in Cancer to me. Um,
Yeah, I feel you, Mark. I agree with you. And I also think about some of the things, if we do come from different places and traditions and the values that uphold those traditions, right? And even in difference, it's like, but what are the commonalities, right? That could branch people to join together. And just it to me, just because of my past and where I come from, my family, it's food. And it's like, hey,
well, that sustains us, doesn't it?
yeah, it was just like, well, like, would you like to let's go meet for lunch and talk? Or would you
Mm.
like to come over and, meet my family and we're, gonna have a meal and then we're gonna discuss even if there's difference or one's coming from a completely different place and the discussions that happen in there. But it's I think from a practical point of view, the little spaces that one can create that come from a place of compassion and love, can be fruitful, I guess is a
Mm.
word, but in a
Mm.
sense can feed. And I think the other part of something like this with Jupiter and Cancer is I think there's an innate thing of wanting to quote unquote feed or to nurture or to enhance. And it's just how one does it. And can we find what's the common conduit to doing it? I mentioned food's one of them, family's one of them we mentioned here, but they could be a various amount of things too.
Yeah.
It could be through creativity or whatever it is, but it is the sense of like, here I want to share this with you. And it's like from an emotional sense, emotional, loving, compassionate place. I want to share this with you. Here, I'm offering this to you. And usually there's an exchange that happens where the person is grounded in their acceptance. And I think if you think about the base core feeling that happens when you give to something or someone because you felt the call emotionally. It's not just up here, but like emotionally, like from your core, from your heart, like you talk about. When you want to give, inherently, that action is just one of the pure raw forms of love. And then when someone accepts, if there's an acceptance, that interchange that happens there is the most simplest of magic, beautiful
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
And everything, then you're co-creating a moment or a space of safety and security, then to go deeper, right?
Yeah.
Step by step, right? So, I'm with you on the compassionate love thing. As always, I will be,
Yeah.
regardless of the transit. But I think in this case, with this transit, there is something incredible that can happen there with this type of transit and for one's own personal chart. And is to remember it's not like what I'm sacrificing. It could go that way if it goes too far. One can think like, well, I'm going to give so I can get something back. And I don't think it's like that. I think inherently at its core, it's like, I'm offering this, I'm giving to you just because I cannot help but want to like share my love with you. Right. So here, have this hot plate of food that I made or what we just baked,
Yeah. Yeah.
and here and it's that. And I think with Jupiterian situations, I think that openness and that push to expand when done freely, I think inherently is a vehicle for love and compassion.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. So, for a little while in June, Jupiter is going to be squaring Saturn and Neptune. Now, Jupiter's already squared Saturn twice before. It squared it, I've got the dates down here, not the exact dates, but the months. Jupiter and Saturn squared last August, and then squared again in December. Okay, so this is the third square they're having and the last square they're having in this bout. Okay, so it's happening early as it moves into Cancer, as Jupiter moves into Cancer. It's happening in the first week or so, or a couple of weeks. So that feeling and of course we've got Neptune involved this time. That feeling of the Saturn Jupiter energy kind of together, where one's kind of opening and blowing the balloon right up, and the other one is saying, let's hold everything together. Let's contain it. Let's bring it in. Let's put a wrapping around it, let's structure it. So it's really interesting how it's doing this as soon as it moves into Cancer. It's a little bit like, okay, it's in Cancer, it's in a water sign, it's in a cardinal water sign, and so it is very heightened already. And if you do exaltations, it is exalted in this particular sign. I'm one of these people that are a bit iffy about exaltations, but that's another story. That's a story for another day. Um, yeah, so there might be something about that rush of energy when it first moves in that Saturn is saying, hey, 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 come on, come on, come on, let's pull it in. Okay, not too fast, too soon, It's kind of like we're gonna put the faucet on full throttle. Is it all going to rush out, or are we going to just open it a little bit at a time and make sure that it's going to go into the right container, right? Let's go
Mhm.
and put it into the bottle, Otherwise, it'll go everywhere, So let's watch it. Let's see it actually moving in the right direction. Give it a path, pull it in, you know, refine it, do it properly. What do you
Yeah,
think
I
of
I think it's so interesting that the third square will do like in pretty much like just to almost a year, whatever is switches from mutable to cardinal. I think yeah, Jupiter is like, okay, we just did a lot of mind power in Gemini. We're gonna go to this emotional place and give us a sense of groundedness and safety and all that. And I think it does come in full board in the beginning. I'm actually grateful for the Saturn transit in Aries right there. It's to condense it all. But I think it's just the dynamics change. I think cardinal signs in general, if we know our basics here, initiate things. And
Yeah.
so, so you have that not only just Jupiter in general wanting to always push forward, it's an initiating cardinal sign of Cancer. And then you have this limiting planet as Saturn or needing structure and the rules and the regulations in Aries. And I also find it interesting that both signs to me have a certain something that deals with survival on its own end. Aries does instinctual survival for one's will, like it must sword and shield in the world, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the Cancer from does it from the protective emotional place, what it needs to feel safe and emotional content from
Mhm.
within. So I find it very interesting that we do that off the bat. I think um guarding and protecting are key words that follow in both those signs.
Yeah.
With at least Saturn being in Aries, there is a sense of protection in guarding from a more that perspective. I must guard myself because I'm on this new path that I'm on.
Hmm.
And then there's the protection we talked about with the shell. But there's a lesson to be learned here about, I think, what it is to expand and contract when we deal with opening up or protecting. Or, Jupiter and Cancer wants to come in and, let's say, talk to the Saturn in Aries situation and, like, tell me your feelings, open up your feelings to me. I'm
Yeah.
here to do, here's this plate of food. And the Saturn and Aries, they're actually really hungry. They're not going to say it, but they're just on guard. They're just on guard. And it's like you're moving too fast, possibly.
Mm.
So, I could see the expansion and contraction that happens there. I like that it happens in the beginning of the Jupiter and Cancer
Hmm.
transit, just to like establish something right off the
Yep.
bat
Yep.
you know so there's that, and plus two, considering Neptune is involved here really close. If you just think about Jupiter and Neptune connecting, that could be like you don't know what's what, or
Exactly.
right. So I'm grateful for Saturn being there, but I think again, when cardinal signs, if they're both trying to initiate something, that could be very caustic too. And um I think of things to deal with Saturnian themes that deal with strength and building strength over time in the sign of Aries. And we talked about this on the video. We talked a little bit on another video we did,
Yeah. Yeah.
but also too, sometimes when we think about Aries, we think about external strength. And the Saturnian version in that sign, I think it's the building up from within before you do the external movements. There's a
Mhm.
type of resilience and strength that has to happen there. And I think that's the kind of common language that could relate from the Jupiter and Cancer realm because they understand strength in another way the sign of Cancer does. It's just
Yeah.
an emotional strength, right? When it's
Yeah.
balanced, and they're it's also initiating that. So they have to find a bridge to each other. Um, so anyway, those are some thoughts.
So interesting. So
Yeah.
interesting, Nicholas. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get the idea too of faith because when I'm looking at Jupiter, Jupiter to me, jumps in boots and all. Jupiter has this kind of go for it energy about it. It's going to happen. It's going to be good. And so there's this, sometimes you could call it blind faith to a certain degree as well.
Mhm.
And being squaring Neptune, Neptune has another version of faith. Neptune has a more visceral version of faith. It's got that feeling of I'm connected to, the greater good, and the greater good is guiding me kind of thing. It's a more internal understanding of that kind of thing. And when I'm looking at those two together, I'm thinking, ooh, this is lovely on one level because, if you are connected to something that is kind of guiding you, from the universe down, that could be really beautiful, but not a lot of us are doing that. A lot of us are just, jumping into things that are going to serve the ego in some kind of way, or jumping into things that on a certain level we kind of know it's not going to end well, but for some reason we can't help ourselves. Or that feeling of, I've just got to go there, I just got to do it. This is why I think Saturn's really good, because Saturn is kind of like the the school teacher that's looking over the kids and saying, get
Mhm.
back from the cliff, come away, kids, or you can't dive there. No, that's dangerous. So in a way, Saturn is kind of, I think the Jupiter in Cancer is giving everybody a little bit more, as I said, a little bit more faith or a little bit more room to move on the level of being able to come into our feelings. And there could be a lot of kids getting too close to the edge or jumping into water that's not going to be safe for them. And Saturn is there in a way, making us be a little bit more cautious or think about it a little bit. I like it at the beginning of this transit, as you said. I really like the idea of this has to be played well for all of us.
Mhm.
Everything in the chart, of course, everything has to be played well. But I feel that Saturn being here at the very beginning, the square to Saturn, is really good on the level of getting us to pull back and getting us to actually go, okay, this is a year of Jupiter in Cancer, and I want to do it properly, and I need something like Saturn to keep me on the straight and narrow, to keep me grounded with this, to keep me on the right track, so to speak. So I like the feeling of it.
Yeah, I think on a simple way, if like I was portraying Saturn in Aries and the exuberance of Jupiter and Cancer was there, and you're like, hey, get off the ledge. It's how it's said or how it's presented. Because if let's say I came from a sympathetic point of view to Saturn, and so it's not about control, Saturnian type of control, like, no, these are the rules, you cannot go there. It's more like I care for you,
Yeah,
and because I care for you and love you, I don't want you to fall off the edge.
exactly.
It's please, I
Exactly.
see your complete exuberance. You don't have to, we don't have to quell that, but you just right over here because you might just lose it all if you go over the edge. So it's the presentation, it's the thing. And so it's again with certain things in astrology, when you find a certain common language to adhere to, or like I said, from a Saturnian perspective, is like you're going to go from a sympathetic emotional view, which Jupiter cancers can totally relate and understand because that's what they do or what they're going to want to do.
Yeah.
So it's defining the conduits like that. But as we know, when we look at transits like this, there's the other examples of like must control what your emotional whatever exuberance is happening right off the bat, and this and that is just like a wet blanket. Right. So again, I think if one were to use these types of things in the chart or whatever, it's I just kind of gave an example. There's probably other ones people can come up with, but again, it's like here's the sympathetic, and then they're like, oh, they came back off the edge, and then you gave them a cookie. And then they're like, oh, that's really good, my belly. I really like this. Like the sandwich that you gave me is a reward for not going over the edge, and then there it is, the
Yeah.
connection. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I like the idea of because Saturn, Cancer is a really subjective sign. It's arguably the most subjective. It truly is. Everything comes from how they feel. Everything. And then with Jupiter there, it's going to get mixed up with truth. So it's going to get mixed up with how I feel is the truth. My truth is coming from how I feel. And, that's kind of like, that's just you. That's what you're going through. That's your pain or your hurt or your family or something. It's not the truth. And so, again, we've got to get our heads around, our subjectivity and how we kind of really kind of, rest our whole life on this rather than Saturn actually pulling it in and actually going, hang on, mate, because Saturn's totally objective. Saturn sees everything, from an emotionally objective kind of distance. And it's really good to be at the beginning of this transit because Saturn can actually pull us all in line around our emotional kind of needs and view and responses and attachments to things that we feel are real. We feel are it's almost like, it's become such a big, big part of who we are that we can't sit back and see our lives and see what we're going through and see our emotional responses objectively anymore. And Saturn's always going to be pulling us back to actually see it for what it really is, the planet of reality. And I
Yeah.
really like that because I think we all need it. I think we all need to understand that, our life isn't based on our emotional and subjective responses to what's going on. Our life out there, what's happening out there is what's happening out there. And we really, really have to see it beyond that. And then I think that's when our feelings can actually really start working. When we get our own crap out of the way, our
Yeah.
feelings, our real feelings, can actually start working then. And I think that's
Yeah.
what Saturn's about.
If there was like a couple more squares after this, I think it'd be a completely different story, but there isn't going to be any other Jupiter Saturn squares like in these two signs. So there is, I think, an established something that happens there. Then, you know, a Jupiter and Cancer story that's going to play out for the year does have that imprint and tattoo on the transit. And it's not saying it can't push out and expand and grow and all of that and enhance. It can, but again, I agree with you. I'm glad that's there in the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And the past, and there's a lot of stuff around learning from the past. We can go back and we can learn from the past, and there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful stuff in the past that we can take forward. But again, it's not about dwelling in the past. It's like, again, it's not about, making the things in the past that weren't terribly good part of now. Everything's about moving forward. Jupiter's got a feeling of that. Jupiter's got a feeling of being able to come into a place of being able to go beyond our horizons. That feeling of coming out of our small local environment and seeing what's going on way beyond. So yeah, coming out of your past and not not putting too much attention on it or living there and starting to put your heart into things that you truly care for, what you really believe in. If there's an animal shelter that you're really interested in, could be a really great time for you to expand your heart enough to be able to do something about being
That
part.
Mark, that's some dangerous stuff you're saying there. He's gonna go walk in an animal shelter, and then the way like dog's gonna look at you, it's like you're gonna come home with a dog and a cat and a snake. That's what's gonna.
Yeah, well, yeah, well, Saturn will pull you in on that. You know what?
Yeah, just the dog. So yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not
yeah, I
talking
feel
about bringing animals home so much.
I
I'm
you
talking
mentioned the
about,
shelter, and I'm just like, oh, that's like,
yeah,
but it's just things like that though, like would also too, it's what tugging on someone emotionally,
yeah,
too. Maybe some people will have walk the story of like, I must nurture this plant or
yeah,
this puppy or
yeah.
this thing. Like they're called to, in that way, one is expanding out because they weren't going to do that before. But for some reason, they find themselves and they're coming home with the dog, with the puppy,
Yeah, you got
right?
to, well, yeah.
Again, that's just symbolic. I'm not literally telling people to do that, even though I know some people will. If they've already been debating this with their partner at home, like, well, this transit's coming, you see,
Yeah,
like,
you can't let me back. Sorry.
yeah. So, again, I was thinking about this because this happens on the 15th and 16th. And the beginning of this, when we're talking, you were talking about the lunations that were happening June. It's a big month in general for Cancer,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
general. And then it's like it's interesting because it's in August, like the 11th and the 12th, we have an interesting moment that's at the beginning of this transit after it's lunation and square with Saturn. We get to do a Jupiter Venus conjunction in Cancer, which I think is a great moment. In general, when Jupiter and Venus get together, can you imagine, what it usually is, regardless of the signs? But
Mhm.
in the conjunction moment, there is definitely a phase that's starting here. So that's part of the beginning of this transit too. And it goes back. to inherently to the love thing and the compassion thing and what one can do uh with the vision of that Jupiter has in Cancer and then Venus coming in. I think it's another type of seed moment that brings growth when it comes to relating and how you relate in general, like with Venus being in Cancer, but that Jupiter takes that along forward and it initiates in the beginning of the transit. I again, and it happens at a point at 14 degrees, getting into what they call the exaltation degree of Jupiter,
Yeah.
where in a sense it's heightened. Um, I'll just rattle this off really quick because when we go to December is when Jupiter will go retrograde. It goes to like I think the late degrees, 25 degrees Cancer, which is if you think about this, I don't think about the last time a transit like this happened where something planet ingressed, and you get a retrograde like midpoint at the degrees, like a 15, but it goes all the way into the third decan, like 24, 25 degrees. Then it goes backwards. So when we go to the next year, when the retrograde ends and it stations forward at 15 degrees, and it's there around the same place that we have this Jupiter Venus connection upcoming August to happen there. And so I think they're two important markers in the transit. And especially with the one in August with Venus, I'm all positive about this. I feel really good about it. I say to push something out forward and initiate something, not necessarily gamble something, but as for a certain type of risk that one would say that stems from a place of love and compassion and security and comfort, I will say yes.
Yeah.
And I will say yes too because I'm biased because I don't think we have enough of it in the world these days.
Yeah.
So, for me, we talk about the beginning of this with Saturn and certain things, but I I want to make sure people know if you're looking at an interesting date or two, it's there. It's August 11th and 12th, and it's not like the most perfect charts, but if you're gonna put a wish out there, if you're gonna think
Yeah.
come from a positive, loving place, a nurturing place, that's it. You
I
know.
love
I
that.
don't know
I
what you
love
think
that.
about that. I don't. I mean, I'm curious, Mark, when you see Jupiter and Venus like in Cancer together, like what comes up for you? But
It's quite beautiful because it has that same feeling for me as well. It's a feeling when I think of Venus in Cancer, I feel a real connection of being able to love another person or love somebody. Venus to me is very much being able to come into a place of that beautiful, connected, calm, secure, sedate, loving, harmonious, balanced feeling that it's like a big exhale. It's like
mm,
you know, it's got that beautiful, relaxed feeling about it. And it feels like if we can if we can do our best in our own way to be able to feed, and I mean feed more figuratively than literally, to be able to feed that energy, into the vibration that we carry around us and to be able to take that with us wherever we go. I feel that everybody will pick up on it. There'll be an energy of real positive love coming straight from you. And again, it doesn't have to be something that you overwork at, you know what I mean? It just feels like it's almost on automatic pilot if you bring it in that this is what I want to be and be confident with it and feel alive with it and believe in it and all those good Jupiter words.
yeah,
Um,
I,
yeah,
I might say something here too because if with the space that we're in right now, because I love the feeling of it too, is like when we see someone else that we care about outside of us, and they might not necessarily love the way we exactly do or come from the past that we exactly would come from, right? But I think part of this too has to do with an acknowledgement and honoring and bringing respect to those who might love slightly differently or come from a different land or past.
Mhm.
And in that sense, there is a relating, uh, even keeled, balanced type of acknowledgement and honoring. And I think with Jupiter, there is that there is a thing about honor. We could bring royalty word in there, but I will use honor more about that because Jupiter does come into the room like, here I am, like
Yeah.
here are my benefits. And and I think what part of that too, if one were to use that with a Jupiter Venus thing, is to like look at the other person and I was like, I see who you are for what you are and the way you do your love or the way you show it, and I honor it and I respect it,
Yeah.
And so it's a thing again, more than ever these days. I need to see it. I need to see it on my social media feed. I need to see it in person with people, that I'm engaging in or in the world. I think more than ever, we need examples of this. And it again, it doesn't have to. It be feel grandiose and feeling, which is like a nice calm exhale. That's it. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be any of it. It could just be a certain type, like, oh, my cup, our cups are full, so cheers,
Yeah.
so I really like the way you were talking about that, and it made, it just brought something into me, and the feeling of it, like especially when you said exhale, it's like, oh, when you have that type of feeling after exhaling, and then you just like everything, the
Yeah.
stress, everything gone, and then you could share that with other people that you care about. I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't get better than that. So you
Yeah.
know
I love that. I love that. What a beautiful way to end our talk, Nicholas. Thank
yeah.
you so
Didn't know
much.
it was didn't know it was gonna happen that way, Mark.
No, I always wait for something really poignant or wait for something, one of those kind of things that you can actually go, oh, there's a happy ending kind of feeling going on here. So I love that. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Nicholas, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for being with me again. You are back by popular demand, by the way. I got a lot of my students saying, oh, I really like him.
Oh, that's
You gonna do
sweet.
more with him? I said, well, I can ask. So. So
Well,
I'm so
thank you, Mark, and thank you to your students and anybody who said something that's very kind and very nice. I'm glad. Just anything, we're on YouTube, you never know who you're talking to out
yeah,
there and
exactly.
who it is and where they are and what state or what time of the day or night is in. And you realize the power of words and messaging. But what's most important to me is that I stand in my own truth and I speak genuinely. I come genuinely because you never know. And I personally, my code and ethics have to do to responsibility to something like that.
Yeah,
And I know that there's only benefit from something like that. So there would be somebody out there watching, I'll never see, never meet, or whatever. But if you're able to walk away with some sort of insight for yourself, right? And you take it into the world and you move forward and evolve, it doesn't get better than that.
it
So
doesn't. It doesn't.
no,
It
it
doesn't.
doesn't get better
Yeah.
than that.
Beautiful, Nicholas. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for viewing, and we'll see you next time. Bye.